this Friday morning, May 31st. You know what tomorrow is? The first day of
Boozer Friday.
No, it's Savant Friday, but tomorrow is the first day of hurricane season. Just remind people of that. And also first day of June. Hey, we got a great lineup today. One of my favorites and our audience's favorite, Coach Jackie Sherrill, native of Duncan, Oklahoma, played his football at Alabama and coached at Washington State, and Pitt, and Texas A&M, and Mississippi State. And he is the clairvoyant one, the crystal ball, the oracles of Delphi in the movie 300. Jackie Sherrill would have been in that group because he saw what's happening coming 30-plus years ago at the Touchdown Club in Memphis. I'll never forget that day. And that wasn't the first time he said it. He's been ahead of the curve. Doug B. Dean checks in from Birmingham. Frank Duffy decided to stay at home up there in Big Canoe, North Georgia. He'll check in with us as well. Hey, smash subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. Allow notifications on your Android and iPhone. And just think about this, folks, when you get up every morning. We are the most blessed nation and the blessed people in the world. You got a lot of gifts. Do something with them. We'll be right back. Got a great show. Get pen and paper handy because here we come.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Hey, man, we got a great one. Coach Jackie Sherrill will be on with us in just a minute. Frank Duffy's here. Just remind people, look, Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee, has a boot sale going on right now through June 16th. It's Father's Day around that time. 25% off all boots, over 7,000 pairs. So get out there, hewlettandunn.com. It spells, the QR code will be up here. But bottom line, they've got more duck heads, Filson, STS, Devil Dog jeans, Rock Mount. I'm going to tell you one thing, those Rock Mount shirts, Bob Dylan, Elvis, Ronald Reagan, they're the coolest shirts. They're really neat. The founder lived to be 107.5. So get out there to Hewlett and Dunn. And also farmers, man, right now you're seeing everybody out planting and all. That's because of ECS House Industries, Chad House, the great folks over there in Cherry Valley, Arkansas. Check them out, houseindustriesinc.com, breaking ground. And also it is Farm Fest this weekend over in Wynn. Wherever you are, get out. It's going to be another fun weekend. Again, Frank, tomorrow, first day of hurricane season. And you know what? I remember so many times growing up, from New Orleans, my parents would be sitting in Jackson Square, drinking a Dixie beer and saying, man, what would happen if this place ever flooded? It's like a bathtub. And it happened. And I was watching on the Fox Weather Channel this morning about that hurricane. And it was August 29th of 2005. And Frank, I remember as a kid, my mother refused to leave Destin. She goes, I'm not going to let some damn thunderstorm ruin my vacation. Bob, get me another vodka. And we stayed through Camille. We were nuts.
Many of us did that in New Orleans as well. We really did all through the years. I remember being there for Betsy in 1965 when I was 4 years old. I literally can remember that. And then, of course, all throughout the years, of course, Katrina she rode the high horse. She's the one that everyone thinks of, everyone remembers. Really more of a man-made issue with the levees breaking, the Corps of Engineers. But, when you grow up in New Orleans, June 1st, it registers with you. Your mom went and put up the old magnetic map, because back in the day you didn't have a map that you could go and look at online. You had to follow it with the latitude and the longitude based on what Nash Roberts, the local weatherman, told you. And you would move those magnets around on a magnetic map of the Gulf of Mexico. I remember it like it was yesterday. So
and
very serious day for us.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we've been down there and a storm has just hit. I remember Ivan, July of '04, down there on 38.
Correct.
Just huge. Like there was about a 15, 20-foot drop off the beach. It got to within 10 feet of the houses there at Vizcaya. And the kids and I were out there swimming in the Gulf, not the ocean, the Gulf. And there were 2 tents out there. There was ours. And there were 3 tents of LSU people. It was the Mike Anderson from Baton Rouge, that family, such nice people. I have grown up going to the beach since I was a little kid with people down in Destin and now Orange Beach as well, with people from Homa and New Iberia and New Orleans and Lake Charles and Lafayette and DeRidder. They are the coolest people. And I picked up a term. If they were having too many road sodas, too many beers, it'd say, tighten up there, buddy, tighten up. I'm going. And now in Auburn, a South Alabama term when you're going to get beard up is, I'm fixing to get toe up. I'm like,
toe up. Toe up. Well, I don't know if you remember that weekend of Ivan, but LSU played Auburn. That was the infamous extra point game, if you remember. Yeah. That was that weekend. So the hurricane hit. And then like 2 or 3 days later was that Saturday where we played you guys in Auburn. And the reason I know this is my cousin came up from they lived in Navarre Beach, and then they came up to stay with us. And then we, on the way back down, we stopped off in Auburn for the LSU Auburn game.
Yeah, right? When Navarre got hit October of '95. Opal hit 2 months earlier. 2 months earlier, we'd been in Lake Gunnersville, Alabama. My family, my sister and I had run that triathlon. It's an awesome race up there. And we're down on the beach Sunday afternoon about 5 o'clock and having cocktails. My dad looks over his shoulder and says, man, we were staying at Silver Dunes. And my dad said, boy, way too much development. He said, what this place needs about every 10 or 15 years is a good hurricane to come through here and clean up. 2 months to the day, Opal hits and blows up Navarre. And as a kid, I remember we would always stop on trips at projects that he, as an architect, they were designing. And they built the Helidome Holiday Inn on Navarre Beach.
I remember exactly where that is.
That thing got chocolatized. I'm just saying. So people pay attention to your never let your guard down. But Frank, by the way, Brenden, does he get an Emmy for how much improvement he's made on his Wi-Fi? I mean,
yes, he does. We just got to get him. We got to fix his mirroring so we can read behind his head. So that'll be fine.
I love the tapestry. Notice I got it right. It's in the tapestry.
That's
It's not a poster or a rug.
I thought it'd be dogs playing pool or something.
What is that? That's the family crest of the Duffys from the old country Ireland, isn't it?
I wish. Actually, I do have a crest from Ireland. That's right across the way. If I turned it around, no, actually, Wi-Fi is a little tough up here in the North Georgia mountains, man.
Well, you got it figured out.
We got to get those squirrels to get on those treadmills to go a little faster if we're going to get better Wi-Fi.
That's right. Hey, Brenden, is Coach Sherrill in with us now, or
nope?
Okay, because was he on there earlier? You said, because I had told him 8:20.
Nope.
Well,
okay, I had told him 8:20. So yeah.
Rob, this gives us perfect 10 minutes to discuss one of the happiest days of the calendar, and that is the start of our NCAA regionals. Mm-hmm. I mean, baseball, college baseball, from the guy that was 25 days in a parking lot in Council Bluffs, Iowa, across the river from Omaha, Nebraska last summer. I tell you what, I love this time of year. There's such intrigue. It's like a chess match in all these 16 regionals. You've got teams seeded 1 to 4, and I love the conundrum of whether you're a number 1 seed or a number 2 seed. Hey, do you trot out your best pitcher, your number 1 or number 2, in hopes of getting into that next winner's bracket game, or do you throw your number 3 thinking that you got enough stuff to where you can make it in, and then you got your ace going up against the number 1 seed? It's a fascinating time.
It is.
It really is. And everybody's pitching staff is now on 4 days rest, because even if you played last Sunday, you're now on full rest. So everyone has their complement of their staff, the starting lineups. Most of the teams are healthy. I know that kid from East Carolina that's got to go up against Wake Forest eventually. He was in the hospital last week. I don't know if he's ready to go. Our 1 and 2 pitchers are ready to go. And it's really interesting. You know, we've got the series up in Chapel Hill up in North Carolina. I did think about driving up there this morning, but the 6.5 hour drive through the mountains, it was a little bit too much for me this morning.
Not in RV Bingo 1, though.
Oh, no. I would have gone up in my convertible. So, yes. but which would have been awesome because it's an incredible, beautiful day to be heading up in the convertible. And I'm going to regret it on first pitch. I know, but I'll be watching. But you know, up there against Chapel Hill, you know, North Carolina only lost 2 games at home this year, but they got a hell of a hot team coming in. My LSU Tigers played blistering hot baseball and came 1 walk-off, actually 2 shots at a walk-off against Tennessee in the championship game in Hoover on Sunday. We had 2 shots we had a man at second and only down by 1 run, and then they wound up getting 2 strikeouts. Again, tip of the cap to Tennessee. But we gave them a scare in that last inning. There was a lot of hillbillies that were clinching up in the bleachers with me.
Chapel Hill is it's a beautiful town.
Gorgeous.
In Raleigh, Durham, the whole research triangle. Wilson, you know, my son lives in Charlotte. So one of his bosses is a UNC guy, and he's taking him to Chapel Hill to the Dean Dome for some basketball games. And you get up, look, Charlotte, there ain't any question about it. Charlotte is a southern city. I mean, it's the South. There's no question. You got a lot of transplants, but you know what? They love being in the South. All right, look what I found yesterday at Barnes & Noble's bookstore.
Oh, here we go.
They're out. And look what else I found. It's football time in Tennessee. God almighty, John Ward. I mean,
proud of the Southland.
Those are the first 2 magazines that I found. Now, look, in my rear, you can see the map of the SEC made by my good friend Barnwood Brenda in Batesville. Say that 5 times real fast when you're drinking wine at night. Doug B. Dean, you know what B stands for? Brilliant, is with us. Coach Jackie Sherrill, I'd said 8:20, and he is so punctual. He's been texting me this morning about what topics and all. And I told him, I said, man, the things I'm looking for, the current landscape of college football, what your thoughts are on the proposed House versus NCAA settlement, and looking ahead to the SEC with Texas and OU. And as always, the questions on Savant Friday. Dave Tompkins, Senior Savant, is at a meeting over on the Atlantic Coast, a business meeting, we'll just say special assignment.
And by the way, you know why Doug Dean comes on at 8:15? Because Frank Sinatra never went on before Dan Dreesen went out to warm up the crowd. That's
why. I'll tell you why. Really, because our good friend Doug B. Dean is because that traffic in Birmingham. And I love Birmingham, but the traffic there.
He gets no sympathy from Atlanta. I'm telling you right now. No sympathy at all.
Yes. Doug, how are you?
Great, man. And listen, my enemies would say that my middle initial B stands for boring. But they just wouldn't understand. That's what they don't run at the savant level of us four. But hey, Rob, you know, I got to say this regarding your mom and her desire to endure Camilla at close range.
Yeah.
The great Ron White, I'm sure y'all have seen it.
Yeah.
When he was a kid, he thought he loved it, how cool these tornadoes are. The waves get big. And he said, until I saw it blow a roof off of a condo. And he said, I'm getting out of here. Then he said, there's some brave soul that was going to stay. Y'all have heard this. Was going to stay at the beach during a hurricane and tie himself to a palm tree to prove that he's tough. He works out. And Ron White said that Scotch drinking Ron White says, you know, I need to educate you. It's not that the hurricane is blowing 100 miles an hour. It's what it's blowing.
Yeah.
When you it's a Mitsubishi who's coming in at 45 miles an hour.
Well,
don't kill the punchline. When you get hit by a Volvo, all those sit-ups will not matter.
Yeah. Well, Doug, I'll tell you what was crazy. My grandparents left with my two sisters and said, we're out of here. And they went on back to Memphis. And I'll never forget eating at the Silver Beach Motel and Cottages, one of the first places. My mother was 4 years old when they broke ground for that. That was the first place there. So we're eating, and my mother goes, "Don't be scared," as she orders another vodka. And she said, "There's nothing to be afraid of." And I'm like, "Okay." And my dad's like, "Boy, you better listen to her." So the waves started crashing against the restaurant. I went out there the next morning. I still remember this as a young lad. The waves were so high you couldn't see over the horizon. Yeah. But when my dad, being an architect, he's a planner. He walked out to Highway 98. The waves were coming over 98. He goes, "Shirley, Junior and I are going to Memphis. If you want to ride, you better get on now, or it's been nice knowing you." And it during the night went over toward the Biloxi. But Doug, jump back in.
Well, I was going to pivot back to college baseball, and man, I know you're jealous, Duffy. It's so relaxing to not have to worry about your team in college baseball.
Yeah, y'all had a rough year.
You're envious. I know you're envious, and Auburn will be back, but they need to figure out a bunch of things on the roster, and I'm sure Butch will do that.
Butch had a tough year.
Listening to, and yeah, it happens, but especially if you're in. But we've had lots of practice dealing with devastation. Being an Auburn fan, we're very skilled at it. Anyway, the great Hal Baird was on a podcast, and they were in part. It was really to remember Rod Bramblett on the 5-year anniversary of that tragic.
Can't believe it's been 5 years. Holy mackerel!
Some kid going 90 miles an hour on Shug Jordan Parkway, but I digress. And they were recalling, and I'm really hoping you were physically there. Hal Baird said maybe my favorite, not the most meaningful, because Auburn got to Omaha a few times under Hal Baird, but it was a baseball game on a Sunday afternoon or evening in Baton Rouge, and it was 1995. That LSU team was loaded. That Auburn team was loaded. And the tension was so thick you could cut it back and forth in that game. And Jay Wagner, who's the son of Alabama State legislator Jabbo Wagner, Jay Wagner hit a triple bottom of the ninth. And the guy that was getting home was the third base coach, sent him. And he said he's a short player. I forgot his name, but he was going so fast to try to get home that he said, all I saw was a hat flying around. And then, of course, there was a cloud of dust at home plate, and the umpires called it safe, and Auburn got out of there alive. But do you remember that 95 Auburn LSU game?
I don't. And what's shocking is that umpire Robichaux called him safe. That's the real shocking part. I would have thought first base umpire Trosclair would have run in and overruled him.
Well, that may have been the way things work in the great state of Louisiana. Yes. What was your governor, Huey? Was that your most famous?
Huey Long.
Yeah.
Kingfish.
The way things work, that may have been that umpire's last game that he called.
Very possible, because that money would have come out the deduct box, and they would have taken him out to a crab trap in Des Allemands.
In Alabama, we've got some swamps with a lot of predators, and it takes about 3 days for a body not to be found again. I don't speak from experience.
Yes, yes, we don't.
There's been many a son-in-law that has met that demise in the great state of Louisiana.
Correct.
Hey, Rob, we've got to ask Coach Sherrill. I'm sure you're already planning to. Now it's breaking, I think, credibly, that the NCAA is reaching a settlement. We are going to be living with unlimited player transfers.
Anything goes.
I can't wait to hear his response. He's going to be on in just a couple of minutes. I can't wait to hear his response. But I do think, as crazy as it is, I'm actually hearing some players say that all this moving around isn't what they thought it would be. And as that kind of sinks in, I think that's a sign of a shift. But it's going to take. Again, this Jaden Rashada thing, that's crazy. And he's at Georgia. That kid doesn't do anything without somebody giving it an okay. I don't know who, but you don't just, oh, by the way, I'm involved in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. That's bad. And if there's nothing in writing, I don't see how he gets anything.
Yeah. Frank, Rob makes a point. This is bold, if not, senseless of me to suggest that the Supreme Court of the United States makes rulings that are correct constitutionally, but unleash living chaos before our eyes. And so maybe we have to we have to hope that common sense and consequences for players when they want to transfer constantly, when they start not getting any NIL, not breaking through in playing time, not getting in even considered in the NFL draft, maybe that, as Rob calls it, the free market, that resides in our brains, if there's a brain left. There have been some living brain donors, as Rob would say, all across the college football landscape. But maybe between coaches and how they run their program, I like the fact that Brian Kelly says, I chuckled at it because I think it's misunderstood. We don't buy players. Yes, you do, Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
You're going to be buying players. But I think what he means is I'm not buying a one-year mercenary that may be disruptive to the locker room anyway.
Yeah, that
so
was
we
his
hope
intent.
that
was his intent, but he's not going to go full Dabo. We saw what it's like when you don't want to play along. Look at Dabo's record the last 3 years. That ain't happening again.
Yeah,
not gonna happen.
And that cannot be because Clemson does not have a war chest.
Oh no, all these schools have war chests. I mean, I chuckle when I get emails. Hey, please help LSU out and make a donation. I'm like, you guys have a printing press down in the basement somewhere at Thomas Boyd Hall, cranking out cash like it's going to town. That would make the printing press that Billy Cannon had running when I was in school seem paltry. I mean, it's amazing the amount of money. And look, what's going to happen when all these kids get their NIL money and now they're free to go at any point in time, and like a bandit, hopping on a horse in the old West with their kerchief up, they head off out of town. That's when we're going to have real problems.
Yeah. Hey, Coach Jackie Sherrill has joined us now, and now we're going to get some real solid opinions on what's going on. Coach, thank you for taking time to join us. And we're just talking about the current landscape of college football. I know you were talking about topics, and it's a crazy time, but it's keeping us from going insane because we know that we're 92 days away from the start of college football season, if anybody's keeping track. So that's a good thing, isn't it, Coach?
Yes. And, there's a lot of great games that we open up with. In the season, when you look at college football now, because of the teams from the West Coast joining the Big Ten and 2 teams, Texas, Oklahoma, joining the SEC, you're going to have some great games and some games that, that's going to draw the audience. Let's put it in really perspective. You have Fox versus ESPN. And so those two, certainly, and of course you have NBC, ABC, which is ESPN. They are trying to make the money, which they are, and it's called eyeballs. And if you have, this has been going on for years, whether it's a radio, whether it's television, you have your ratings. So the ratings determine what the advertisers pay, and that's what generates and drives the money. Now, you look at, let's say Texas A&M. If you go online right now and try to get tickets in great seats, you may be paying anywhere from $5,000 to $6,000 for the ticket.
Yeah. It's about the PSLs or just the priority seating and all like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah. Frank, Doug, jump in here. I've got a lot of questions, but I want y'all to get started. But Coach, I like what you just said. It's all about eyeballs.
Coach Sherrill, we can. I'm sure we will be ducking in and out of the I guess the NCAA regulatory side of college football between NIL, transfer portal, the bombshell. I can't say I'm surprised, but the settlement that supposedly is coming from NCAA to allow unlimited transfers. But with that backdrop, we have, Coach, and you are more qualified than most to talk about the great football culture and fan culture of Mississippi State, and with what Lane Kiffin is trying, the brand of football he wants to create in Oxford, and that he's getting a lot of pressure put on him this year to show us what you're made of, make the playoff or bust. But I've always thought of it, Mississippi State, especially in your tenure, but not just yours, as if nothing else, a always physical, blue collar team. And I use blue collar in the most complimentary sense of that. Hard workers, right? I mean, you can have a 4 or 5 star that's a hard worker. So what do you think Mississippi State needs to be careful not to pivot away from their historical, if you will, DNA as a college football program? Your thoughts on that?
Well, here's what I always told the players. When we played Alabama or Tennessee or played some of Florida, the great teams, we're not going to outrun them. They're going to have more speed. So the only way that we have a chance is to make the game physical. And I remember we played Florida with Steve Spurrier. And the last thing I put on the board before we went out on the field is make the head coach throw his visor. And
I like
so
that.
on Monday, I put a little clip together and showed him throwing his visor just over and over and over. And so the players they know more than what we give them credit of knowing, and they understand it. I do think right now in the culture, you have to be very, very careful, because you are at the point as a head coach of turning away some of your biggest donors. And I do know for a fact that schools right now, some of their largest donors that have giving up to $50 million are saying to the schools, I'm not giving you any money for the NIL.
Yeah, Coach, that is what I've been dealing with as a financial advisor. On top of doing this show, super wealthy people, they won't touch NIL.
No, and and they have that right, but that's their feeling. Yeah. I've always used the comment. I said, I'm not buying your flesh. I will help you, but I'm not buying your flesh. And I think that you have some coaches today that feel that way. Now, do they deserve part of the pie when I say the billions of dollars? And they deserved it a long time ago when the NCAA was making all the money off of their likeness and image. That should have been shared to the players. This could have been stopped a long time ago by the NCAA if they had said part of the television money will go to the players.
Well, and Coach, I would ask you, didn't that almost appeasement by the NCAA and not having a backbone and making decisions, going back to the 80s when you were prowling the sidelines, didn't that really set up this feckless sort of impotent leadership that we have now? And now we've got this Pandora's box that's wide open that there's no regulation of, and you're going to have the haves and the have-nots just get further and further apart. I mean, do you see that that's really kind of where this started, was from them having a lack of backbone over all the years and having decisions and throwing out punishments that made no sense, that flew in common sense?
Yes, absolutely. But I will say that when you look at 2 or 3 things, One is when they did away with the dormitories, because they felt that the SEC, ACC, and back then the Southwest Conference and Big 12, they had the advantage over the Big 10 and the Pac 10 back then. So they changed it, and it passed by a very few votes. They had a block vote of the Pac-10, the Big 10, and the Mid-American, and they took away the dormitories where you had 51%. That was the by law, 51% had to be student bodies. And then you took away their training table, and you only got what the university had in their meal plan. And the meal plan was 21 meals, 3 a day. But the universities knew on Friday, Saturday, and most of Sunday, the students were not on campus. They were out somewhere else. So the meal that at Mississippi State, for example, was 3, 5, and 7. So tell me where a 300-pound lineman is going to eat for $3 anywhere or $5 anywhere.
Yeah.
So they gave that money to the students, but they also kicked them out of the dormitories. Now they're in apartments, and they're using their meal money for that. Now, fast forward, that all changed when it was a national televised Final Four where a student says, I don't have money to eat. And 2 days they passed the rule that every student could get whatever they wanted to eat. And so don't tell me that the NCAA could have changed this and helped. What I would like to know is how much money they have spent on attorneys and fighting lawsuits. How much?
Yeah. Untold millions.
Yeah, it's frustrating to watch.
It's
Coach.
in the billions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Coach,
Coach
yeah, that's true.
I'm sorry the
Coach
way
Cheryl.
I'm dressed. I'm sorry the way I'm dressed, but it's raining really hard, and I had to go out and move my car to maybe keep from getting hail damage.
No apologies.
no
I know what you're
worries.
going through out there. Yeah.
Coach, I wondered, it sounds absurd to most good Americans for any of us to say, well, do you think head football coaches at the power, Division I, the Power 5 level, are getting fed up with coaching? And it sounds silly because they've got contracts from $5 to $12 million a year, but all that money aside, and a lot of us will suffer a lot of slings and arrows if you pay that kind of long money. We'll do it for a few years anyway, and then maybe you get your buyout. But do you, if you can sort of put yourself in the mind of these coaches at the top 20 or 30 programs, it's got to have an aspect to it's a little bit miserable. For example, to try to coach your team hard, be able to rely on who the heck's going to be on your roster next year. How would you feel about it if you were dropped into one of these programs?
Well, I think that you have coaches, and you have more and more that's coming up, just like Sonny Dykes. If you don't want to be here, I'll help you pack. And I think that's where the coaches are today. And there's no question that Coach Saban got tired of it. When you have a player that is demanding playing time and demanding X number of dollars, as a coach, that's not how you were trained. That's not what your DNA is. Yeah. But to survive, you have to have people around you now that understand it and turn it over to them. But one thing that has changed, you as the head coach now have to spend time going to your alumni and asking for money, asking for NIL money. And so you're adding days that head coach is putting on his calendar. I don't know if many head coaches today that really have time for their families.
And coach, what about the recruiting? You know, the recruiting is not once you land them, you're done. You got to keep recruiting these kids for every one of their 3 or 4 years that they're on campus every day. I mean, can you imagine that workload now? Once you land a kid, he can take off a week. It's got to be a workload. I see why they now have 100 people on the staff at major universities like in Alabama and LSU and Auburn. They got staff coming out of the ears because they got to keep the prima donnas from getting upset over not getting enough, playing time, and then they're going to go take the highest offer.
Well, I do know that, again, you have some coaches that are going the opposite direction. And I think it's going to get to a point where if you want to be here, okay. And there's no doubt that coaches feel and want to help the players. And when I say that, I mean they deserve part of the pie. So it's up to the commissioners, it's up to the administration to take that off the coach. And you do have some schools that understand it, some ADs that understand it, and are giving help to the coach in that department, or to go out and raise and manage the NIL. Now, don't tell me, excuse me, don't tell me the head coach doesn't know and doesn't give the okay for whoever's managing the NIL what amount of money they're giving the player.
Absolutely knows.
Yep.
Now,
Coach,
what it
one of
should
the
have
things,
been done, what should have been done years ago, the NCAA should have said everybody gets paid the same. They get the same part of the pie. And if that had been done, we would not be in the situation we are today. Now, they're trying to fix a problem, and of saying we're going to give 20 or 22% of the television package to the players. So where the 20 or 22 million is coming in is what right now they're projecting every school is going to get from the television, from the conference. So you're looking between 80 and 100 million. So they're talking about cutting costs, cutting back. And that's where you're saying now the walk-ons can't play or can't be part of your program. We're going to limit to 85, which is unreal that you can dictate and say, well, now that doesn't, what happens if you lose players?
Yeah, on a scout team because you got nobody else.
That's right. Yep. Teams have to practice against somebody, and they're talking about safety. If they get rid of the walk-ons, now you got to practice against each other. Now they're saying that the pros do it. Well, there is a big difference between pro ball and college ball. I mean, a big difference. But how many guys in how many teams make it to the final and win the championship only because they have more players that have not gotten hurt, and they have more players that are ready to play that final game?
True.
Tell me if Kansas City would have won if Mahomes was hurt.
No, I don't think so.
Close. Nope, not even close.
Coach Rob, Rob has found it, and you would agree with this, having been on the show several times. Rob's, I've always appreciated that he tries to never compromise being respectful and classy when guests come on. And so Duffy and I can occasionally go rogue and ask questions that are maybe a little less. But I'm probably
free press.
Yeah.
If there's a fan base that's worthy of admiration and is the Crimson Tide, I can like that or not like it, but they're a very high IQ football fan base. So is LSU, so is Auburn. There are a bunch of them, most of the SEC. But my question is the dynamics at Alabama with Kalen DeBoer being bold enough to do what everyone said you would never want to do, which is immediately succeed Coach Saban. What would it look like? You got Nick Saban. He's going to be an analyst on ESPN. And I can promise you, Reese Davis and Herb Street are going to ask him to talk about what he's seeing on this Alabama team. So what people are saying, well, if Nick is too close to the program, he still knows these players still love him, and he doesn't give breathing room to DeBoer, that could be problematic. If you're Nick Saban or you're Kalen DeBoer, what does a perfect transition look like from your point of view, Coach?
Well, Nick will be very professional. Nick will also be very cautious of what he's saying, and especially, and I would say that he had that conversation with ESPN, with the game day people, of saying, this is going to be me. This is what I will, my personality. Don't expect me to go somewhere and say something that I wouldn't say or don't want to say. So I think they had that conversation, and that may be in his contract.
Yeah. Coach, here's another one. When like what Doug's saying, when Ray Perkins took over for Coach Bryant and he took the tower down, that set off shockwaves. And it also, the very next year at a Christmas party, it hit me. I was with a bunch of my friends that went to Alabama and back in Memphis, and I said, the Iron Bowl ain't the Iron Bowl if both teams aren't really good. Nobody wants to watch 2, 3, and 8 teams play. And, I remarried. My oldest daughter's an Alabama grad. She's still a good person. I love it. I got a Vol for life as a wife. Okay. So Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama. And there's a family dynamic here, and you live out in Texas, but you were born in Duncan, Oklahoma, but you played your high school football where?
I played high school, Biloxi, Mississippi.
But that's what I thought. Biloxi. Yeah. Okay. So you just think about the family part. And so I see this thing the other day. Some Texas fans were on some thread with other SEC fans. And it was funny because they said, I will never be able to pull for other conference members. And the guy said, let me tell you something. In the SEC, we pull for each other.
That's
by
true.
the way, how can we get more of you on football Saturdays? Where do we find you on a Saturday? We need you more because you're honest.
Well, I'm either at A&M or Mississippi State or Pittsburgh or Alabama. I'll be at one of those.
I love that.
That's great. Well, Rob, Rob, let me just say one quick point, and I'll turn it over to you, Doug. Rob, to your point, I will never forget, as long as I live, being in the Superdome in 2003 when LSU was playing the national championship game against the Oklahoma Sooners. And I was there, and I can tell you, before we gave the LSU chant, once we knew that game was ours at about 3 minutes to go, Saban was on the sideline. We had a big sack. We were getting the ball back. We knew the championship was ours. The chant that was given that night in the Superdome was not LSU, LSU. It was SEC, SEC. That is very, very telling about the conference pride. That was said before our own school's name was.
Wow.
Well, you see that everywhere.
Yep.
There is an unwritten rule in the SEC that no one is better than no one's vote is stronger than any other vote. They all have the same vote on everything they do.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Doug?
Coach Sherrill, most any player would tell you if they are lucky enough to play in one college national championship game, whether it was back in what we like to call the mythical national title days where the AP and UP voters decide. Usually that was indisputable. I mean, you could tell which team deserved it. But just to get to play one, if you win one, that's a big deal. Coach Jackie Sherrill was in 62 to 65. You got to be part of winning 2 national championships. My question is, do you still keep those rings around? Do you ever slip one of those rings on just for grants, Coach?
Oh, yeah.
Well, one of them's in the Hall of Fame at the University of Alabama. And,
Cool.
my son has the other one, so yeah.
Pretty cool.
And my son looked at me when I gave it to him. Excuse me. Of course, he was very honored. He said, "Should I wear this?" And I said, "If you want to." I said, "There's a lot of people," and then I referred it to. He graduated from Texas A&M. I said, "There's a lot of sons and daughters that wear their mother and father's ring and grandfather's ring or grandmother. So it's up to you."
Yeah.
Coach,
I love that.
I'll be brief, but tell a quick funny story. Takeo Spikes is a great friend of mine, which is an honor. And he likes to tell the story when he was playing at Auburn. And y'all will recall Terry Bowden deciding, for reasons that I'd rather not go into, that it was time to fire Wayne Hall. If only we had NIL back then, Frank Duffy, when cheating was legal. But, yeah. So the great Bill Oliver, who's
Brother
we
Bill.
can all agree, a savant of a defensive coordinator, was brought in, and those of us that followed football, were happy with that. But Takeo tells a story that the defensive room, the players were going to take a while to accept this guy coming into Auburn. He had to win their loyalty over. So Bill Oliver's having this meeting with Takeo and all the starting players, and they're skeptical. They have frowns on their face, and he's going on about, "Hey, I see how y'all play. I can help you get to the NFL," and he's really selling them. He finishes this diatribe, and he says, I've been doing all the talking. Maybe I should let y'all ask questions. He turned to Takeo with that size 23 neck, even back then, and Takeo said, "Yeah, I got a question, Coach. Why are you wearing an Alabama national championship watch?"
That's funny.
Hey, a better story is Dr. Andrews.
Yes.
Went into Saban's office, Coach Saban's, and he had an Auburn national championship ring on. And he's talking to him, and he said, "I noticed I had my ring on, so I hid my hand, I pulled it off, and slipped it in my pocket."
That's funny. Hey, by the way, the Brother Oliver story, all I can tell you is if we would have had Brother Oliver, Joe Lee Dunn, and Pete Jenkins at Appomattox, the Yankees would have never made it into Virginia. That's all I know.
They wouldn't have. And Coach, you know what's cool is I've got a friend that knows Bill Oliver, and his family's very well connected at Alabama and have been for a long time. And, people always go, "How can y'all two be such good friends?" Auburn and Alabama. I said, that's what makes the SEC the SEC. And this show, SEC Sidelines, Sports Network, and SECU. And by the way, I would love to get Coach Barry Switzer on this show with you, the two of y'all together, because I think that would be that'd be like getting Led Zeppelin back together.
I will call call Barry today and ask him.
Thank you.
By the way, that's why we might have got the dormitories removed.
Yeah, that's true.
What was going on in that Oklahoma dormitory?
Man, but you know what, Coach? When we were kids growing up, watching college football, you're part of that badass generation. That's just what it is. I mean, my dad's 95. He's watching right now. And my mother met you at a party at Jan Gwynn's house in Memphis, big Mississippi State guy. And she goes, he was always the enemy. And she was sitting on a couch with Jan and Carla Gwynn, his late wife. And she came back. She goes, that's some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. and John David Badura is watching the show in the Memphis. Shameless plug for the Memphis Touchdown Club, Coach. But they love you up there. You're the best speaker we've ever had.
Rob, if you get Coach Sherrill can get Barry the great Barry Switzer on it. We've got both of them. Yeah. You will barely need me enough to.
Yeah, no, we'll step back.
No.
One hour will cure the listeners of any traces of political correctness, which I will
Yeah, the funniest story
yes.
With Barry and Coach Royal, they went back and forth, but make a long story short, there was one assistant from Oklahoma that dressed up in painter outfit, with the white hat and the white cloth. And he was painting the stadium at Texas, watching practice. And
that's
so
I hadn't heard that.
There are a lot of stories that went back and forth. And then,
that's pretty good.
Then they asked to do a lie detector test. So both staffs had to do a lie detector test. And, some of the stories where the assistant, one of them, which coached for me later, he said he was so nervous when he got strapped in. They turned it off. They said, we can't test him.
The paper was wet from sweat.
I love it.
I'm sure there are some great stories from back there in the late 60s and the early 70s, the wild, wild west of coaching. And I'll bet the Darrell Royals and Barry Switzers of the world gave the calm Tom Osborns of the world just stomach acid.
Yeah, Coach Osborne, of course, coached great story. When I went to watch Nebraska practice when Coach Devaney was there. And so in between their breaks, the players would come and sit down and sit on their helmets. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, Coach Bryant never would allow that to happen. And then, but when the whistle blew, I said, well, maybe we ought to think about this, because they went after each other in practice that very, very hard. And the most impressive thing is how they practiced against each other and how hard they did. But when the whistle blew to take a break, they took a break.
Yeah.
Coach Sherrill, I'm going to put you, if you don't mind, we're going to put you hypothetically on the college football selection committee with the 12-team playoff. And, of course, we have to wait and see who the highest ranking 15 or 20 are and what the controversy will look like. But my main question I'd like you to opine about is, if you consider, with Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, a league that was already a gauntlet to try to get through, in which arguably a 2-loss season should make an SEC team worthy of a 4-team playoff. And we understand the politics of that. But now with 12, if you have kind of a normal year where there are 2 teams with 1 loss regular season, there may be a third team that makes it into the SEC championship game and wins it. Maybe they have 2 or even 3 losses. What do you see as a scenario in terms of the Big Ten and SEC's likelihood of how many teams they might make the 12-team playoff?
Well, I know that there'll be over 50%, and there may be 70%, because all you have to do is look at the NIL. You look at the NIL, who has the top 5 or the top 10 NIL money. So it's never changed. You've always had teams that had more resources than other teams. And, it could have been, I've always said, is Memphis going to ever have the same money. Of course, now with FedEx, but I said, will Memphis have the same tools as Mississippi or as Tennessee or Alabama, the teams that they're surrounded in Arkansas, teams they're surrounded by? And that answer is no. That they'll never have the same facilities, never have. So don't tell me that a kid from Memphis, if he was playing in a lower class that won and they had a national championship, that kid wouldn't be just as proud as a kid that was at Alabama or Tennessee or anywhere else that was wearing his national championship ring.
No doubt.
So, I mean, it doesn't matter. What matters is, can you, when you take your players and put them in a game, do they have a chance to win?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying about so many alumni feel, well, if I'm from Troy, that I can compete with Auburn. There's no way.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. But Coach, you had talked about, I say private equity is going to get involved. Derek Dooley's supposedly involved with a group to have a playoff for the teams, not in the Super 65 or whatever. But you're right. It's all relative. We had Ryan Silverfield, Memphis's football coach, on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he's really excited about the $25 million commitment from FedEx. And there's Memphis, the state. I think there are 5 or 6 billionaires families in Memphis, and not too many of them went to Memphis, but they live in Memphis. If they can start tapping into that, that's scary. Now, again, you're at Texas A&M, and as Franz Beard says on this show, only God and the Longhorns have more money than the Aggies.
That's about right.
But you live in Wimberley, between San Antonio and Austin, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you address the law school at Texas A&M. I know you've done that. You speak a lot. But again, 32 years ago, you saw this coming. So here we are now. And I like that, because I think it's great for the morale of the United States of America to have college sports all over the country. And you've coached out in Washington for 1 year at Washington State, but you travel. You've been to every state in the country. People love their sports, don't they? There's no question.
Yeah. Yes. You look at right now with baseball and softball. There's no question that not only football, but basketball, tennis, golf. Softball. So that answer is yes. That's why you have, packed stadiums at Ohio State, Michigan, A&M, Texas, Alabama. You can go on and on. They want to watch their teams play.
Yeah. And the key word being there. THEIR. That is so important. We've talked about this so many times. It's not the name on the back of the jersey. It's the name on the front of the jersey of why we have 109,000 people packed in stadiums across, especially the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah. Yeah. And Coach, that's Ivan Mazel said on the show a couple of years ago. He said, college, and he did a great job as, I think, executive producer on that 150th anniversary of college football in 2019 they did on ESPN. But it's the love of the laundry. And I spend a lot of time in Mississippi, down in the Delta. I've got a lifetime hunting rights on a little farm in Lambert, down there between Vance and Marks. You know those little towns in the Delta. And you've been to Clarksdale. I bet you've eaten at Abe's Barbecue before, in the Rest Haven.
Yeah. Yes, I have.
And those people, I'll tell you, the day in Mississippi, it was October 4th, 2014, when Mississippi State started off by beating A&M that morning. And later that day, I didn't know till that night, one of my kids had snuck down. He wasn't old enough to drive, to Oxford and stormed the field when they beat Alabama that day. But that day, and we were eating lunch at Abe's Barbecue in Clarksdale, you just got a sense in the state of Mississippi the tectonic plates, man, everything was in line. That's the most powerful day. And then Auburn capped it off that night, Frank, no offense, but winning 41-7 against LSU.
Well,
October
remember,
4th, 2014, maybe the greatest day in the history of college football, other than December 2nd, 1989.
and by the way,
November 30th.
And by the way, that was a bad night for me. I had seats on the top row of Jordan-Hare. I had to carry my butt all the way up there for that butt whipping and down. But Coach, can you remember the days in Jackson when they used to have the doubleheader? You used to have Mississippi State, Tennessee, and then maybe LSU, Ole Miss, or you would have a doubleheader in Jackson some Saturdays. Do you recall that?
Absolutely. I was in the press box scouting some of those games. The question the question I always had is how were they able to clear the stadium, and some people refused to leave.
I'm sure. I'm sure a few of my LSU brethren were hard to get out of those chairs when that bourbon was going. Of course, we were always in that game.
Coach, we used to have it at Crump Stadium. Dad says he used to sneak in as a kid at Crump Stadium in Memphis by the medical center. You'd have Mississippi State and Tennessee and Ole Miss and Memphis play double headers. I mean, and I just think that the love of college football, and Doug writes about it about as well as anybody I've ever seen, but the more you read about college football, the more you fall in love with it. I mean, it's like that favorite restaurant. You just, even when you have a bad meal, if the service is good, you know, you come back. If they, hey, I'm sorry, I burned the steak, you know, I'll make up for it. But David Whitley, a writer for the Gainesville Sun, I was on the Buddy Martin show Tuesday night. He said it, and Tony Barnhart said it on this show. Not even the adults can screw it up. And David Whitley said, it's idiot proof. We love this game so much because we love the people and the coaches. And I always remember going to a lot of games in Starkville and eating Little Dewey's barbecue, you know, catering out there for the Auburn Club buses and stuff. And the architecture school, by the way, one of the most highly funded in the Southeast at Mississippi State. Great vet school. Now they got an honors college. You wouldn't believe the number of kids from Memphis going to Starkville now, Coach. You started a fun, you know Leo Seal. Okay, Dad has sat with Jan Gwynn at the Leo Seal in the Seal Center a few times, going down to games. But you ignited the fundraising like they'd never seen at Starkville. I remember last year, Mississippi State got a $100 million gift from one of their alumni that lived in the Houston area. I think he was in the petroleum industry. But anyway, you ignited that. Okay.
Yeah, he has now moved to Jackson.
Okay.
I mean, no, excuse me, to Starkville.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you know,
I can see why.
Yes.
Yeah.
Coach Sherrill, I assume Rob, we're winding down on.
No, we got a few more minutes. We're good.
Okay.
If you can stay, Coach. Yeah.
Coach, you know, I don't know if it's cynical. I think it's just accurate and it's probably realistic. But we have entered the era of, shall I call it, semi-professional college football. And, you know, people can decide, is that going to ruin the product, the sport? Will we think of game day and fan interest and season ticket buying and tailgating? What will be different? Maybe very little as time. We still want to go see our team in that, if you're an Auburn fan, that navy blue and Jordan-Hare, and we still want to go to Baton Rouge and all throughout the SEC. But if you can squint your eyes, Coach, and go out, let's say 10 years from now, if you had to guess, what things might be different, if any, that were what we think of as college football in the Deep South as you look at it?
Well, I firmly believe it's going to be stronger. I think they're going to figure out how to treat the players and treat them equally. Now, you will never, I think that 20 or 22% that is going to go even with all the players on the team, but you're never going to change the NIL. So players will still have a chance, but the university and the coaches will have zero to do with the NIL, meaning that will be in the bylaws of. I feel that we're headed to an NFL model. You'll have certain number of teams. You'll have East-West. You'll play those, and then play for a national championship. The conference commissioners will have a commissioner of the league, of that league, and the conference commissioners. Now, the reason this is all my opinion now. The reason the NCAA has SCOS and made a decision to flip from where they were to where they are going now is they had to do something to hold on to being part of college football.
Yeah.
And
survival.
And yes. And because they still are saying that football is part of the NCAA, the direction they were going, college football, especially the Big Ten and the SEC, they were getting out, and they sent those bullets, and they wasn't small bullets; they were big cannon balls. Sent those to the NCAA, saying we're going to go out on our own.
Yeah, Mark Emmert was changing his shorts daily.
Yeah, it is. And Coach, look, man, I know we a little bit long, but great stuff. And Frank and Doug, I think this discussion, what you just said there at the end, is the takeaway. I mean, it's just they had to for survival. I think survival is what it's all about. But Coach, getting you and Barry Switzer on here would be about again, that's like getting Led Zeppelin back together. I mean, it's the Led Zeppelin of college football, and you grew up with that band.
Yeah, I'll call Barry. You know, we had some great recruiting battles. You know, I beat him on some, and he beat me on some. What he took away from me that I thought I had was Bosworth.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Wow. And I'd love to get him on the show. And my friend Dave Cody's watching the show right now out in Bellingham, Washington. He was sports anchor for about 34 years at Channel 7 in Austin. And he, listen, there's so much, these stories just connect us. They ground us. You know, take your shoes off, walk on the grass and get grounded. Spend a little more time in the country. But this is great for the mind. Frank and Doug's questions were awesome. So y'all, closing comments, and let me say, most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. We live in the greatest country in the history of the world. It is we the people, and this show is built on the great guests and my co-hosts and everybody on here. So thank y'all for watching. But wrap it up, guys.
Coach, I was just going to say, I'm not predicting the outcome, but Oklahoma Sooner fans, and they know a little about Southeastern Conference football and the venues. And Oklahoma's warm welcome to the SEC will be on September 28th during our stadium, and probably under the lights. So that'll be, and they could very well come in there and beat Auburn, but that should be an interesting one for the Sooner fans.
Oh, it'll be big. But again, like if you go on, let's take that game. Go on Ticket HubStub or whatever it's called, StubHub. Go on and try to get a game ticket for Oklahoma-Auburn. Try to get a game ticket for Texas A&M. I mean,
Texas, Georgia.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Well, 97 days left. We're counting them down, boys. Can't wait. USC, Southern Cal, you can run, but you can't hide. We heard y'all been trying to duck us. Come get you whooping. Come get you whooping, boys. We're going to see you out there in the desert. They got holes out in the desert.
God, I love it. Coach, how do people keep up with you and follow what all you're doing? Because, again, I really wish we had you on the SEC network. I know you cover a lot of ground, but you're a truth broker, and I appreciate
knows where all the bodies are buried. That's for sure.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, hey, Barry may know a lot more bodies buried than I do.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what, y'all are why we love the game. And there were times, man, having to play against you. I think the takeaway too is we're not gonna be as fast as other teams, but at Mississippi State, the physical. And you play Mississippi State, you're going to play a full 60.
Bring your lunch pail. Yeah, bring your lunch pail. By the way,
I got a text. Somebody says, did Coach Sherrill have anyone like John Bond? Well, I got to coach Danny Marino, and Kevin Murray. So John Bond was Johnny Manziel years ago.
He sure was. Beat our ass 4 years in a row.
Valdosta, Georgia.
That. John Bond beat us 4 years in a row. Mississippi State did.
God.
Emory Ballard and that wing bone.
Now, John Bond would be on an island today if the NIL was back in.
Hey, man, that money goes a long way in Valdosta, Coach.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Rob, what we need to do with Coach and he and Coach Switzer and maybe another old Southwest Conference coach comes on, we need a Southwest Conference story that would last an entire hour. That would be one hell of a show about the old Southwest Conference.
Hey, we'll get Bo Carter on here with us, guys. Bo Carter loves Jackie Sherrill.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Boy, Coach, we're ready. You just tell us when. I don't care if it's whenever. We're ready to go.
I will do that, but I'll call Barry today.
All right.
Hey, and I'll run out and buy a 1976 Trans Am just for the occasion.
Hey,
that's what everybody got.
Hey, we'll put the rabbit ears on the TV, a color TV. We'll watch it on the floor. Look, the magazines are out, folks. This is Lindy's. I found it at Barnes & Noble. And this other one here, it's Football Time in Tennessee. So, Coach Jackie Sherrill, Frank Duffy, Doug Dean, everybody, producer Brenden Martin, thank you so much. We're out of here. We'll see you Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.